Creature from the Black Lagoon is a 1954 Universal monster movie about a group of scientists who travel to the Amazon in search for the elusive Gill-Man. The Gill-Man is a creature who can live both underwater and on land. Now, if you've been following my channel, you'll know that I've been on a journey to watch every single Universal monster movie. Now, in my first video, I left out Creature from the Black Lagoon trilogy. But to be fair, I hadn't watched all the movies yet, okay? I didn't know everything there was to know about them, and I didn't think that the creature was the same vein as like Frankenstein's monster or Dracula. But after I posted that video, well, I learned that the Gill-Man is just as important, if not more important, because it turns out he's one of like everyone's favorites. Yeah, there was a lot of comments about how I didn't watch Creature from the Black Lagoon. But now I've watched it, and spoiler alert, this movie rocks. Got an email. Venmo invited me to their credit card program. This movie came to be when William Ayland learned about a half-fish, half-human creature that lived in the Amazon River. So he hears that legend, and then takes inspiration from Beauty and the Beast, and writes the first version of what was then called the Sea Monster. Fast forward to 1953 when Jack Arnold is hired to direct a movie that is now called Creature from the Black Lagoon. The 50s brought a fad of black and white 3D movies that took the industry by storm, causing Creature from the Black Lagoon to be a 3D movie. And even though the movie was initially distributed as a 3D film, by that time the fad had kind of worn off, so a majority of people watched it in standard 2D. In this movie, we follow a group of scientists as they travel down to the Amazon in search for a half-land, half-sea fish / creature. During the search for this creature, the female scientist Kay Lawrence goes for a little swim and attracts the creature. I've heard some people call him the Creature and some people call him Gill-Man. I'm going to do a mixture of both throughout this video so that way I don't get too many comments yelling at me. So Gill-Man sees this beautiful woman swimming and starts climbing on their boat, trying to take her back with him. He's madly in love with her, and I mean, who can blame him? I mean, did you see her swimming down there? Well, the men on the boat start to get aggressive with Gill-Man, and that causes Gill-Man to act aggressively back, killing some of them. Now, this is a really wonderful movie about the arrogance of the ambitious, the unrequited love of a monster, and, you know, how nature is not a monster just because it fights back. And very quickly, Gill-Man became one of my favorite monsters, right up there with Frankenstein's monster and the Wolfman. By far, the most amazing part of this film are the underwater scenes, which is even more impressive when you remember that this is from the 50s. Like, this isn't CG. They didn't green screen the underwater scenes. They went underwater. And they filmed all of the underwater scenes with stuntman Rico Browning in a suit that made it almost impossible to see, where he would hold his breath for up to 4 minutes at a time. Yeah, he would hold his breath. There was no oxygen tank. These underwater scenes are what makes the movie stand out so much to me. Without them, this movie is really no different from Dracula or The Mummy, you know, a monster in love with a woman. And I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I mean, just these underwater scenes, I'm really blown away by them. So I mentioned that the suit made it difficult for the stuntmen to see, and that is the case for both suits. There was a suit made specifically for the underwater scenes and a suit made for the on-land scenes. Ben Chapman played the monster on land, and he had a really difficult time with that suit. It was difficult to see, extremely hot, and the suit was made where he couldn't sit down, so he was standing up for the entire 14-hour shoot days. But all that struggling paid off because the movie was a huge success. It made $1.3 million in the box office and was critically acclaimed. I mean, even today, it has an 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. And you know, people would just be hating these days. But even more impressive than the success of the film is the impact on pop culture that The Creature from the Black Lagoon has had. Now, it has 2 sequels, which we will get into in a few minutes, but it also inspired other huge movies like 1975's Jaws by Steven Spielberg and Guillermo del Toro's Shape of Water. Not to mention that the Gill-Man, or creatures inspired by the Gill-Man due to copyright, have appeared all over the place, including tons of shows and films like The Colgate Comedy Hour, The Munsters, Scooby-Doo, Hotel Transylvania, Robot Chicken, Johnny Quest, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Monster High, and many more. I mean, it even spread out into pinball machines, comic books, video games. So many different forms of media having either a version of the Gill-Man or the actual official Gill-Man. And this movie had a huge impact on the creature feature films that had slowly lost their way during the 30s and 1940s. And even though this movie was made 2 decades after Dracula and Frankenstein kicked off the Universal monster films in 1931, it is still very much a part of that legacy and a great addition. In 1955, Creature from the Black Lagoon would get a sequel called Revenge of the Creature. Directed once again by Jack Arnold, we pick up with a bullet-riddled Gill-Man being taken to an oceanarium in Florida. I bet SeaWorld had a really hard time competing. I mean, Shamu is nothing compared to the Gill-Man. In this movie, Gill-Man takes a liking to one of the female scientists that are studying him, Helen. Eventually, Gilly Boy breaks out and kills one of the scientists, making his way to freedom in the ocean, Free Willy style. But this is the Gill-Man we're talking about, and the Gill-Man has a weakness, and that weakness is bad bitches. So even though he's made it to freedom, he can't stop thinking about Helen, and so he starts stalking her. Then, when she's chilling at a seaside restaurant, he pops out of the water and takes her. And after a bit of a chase, the cops show up and kill our freaky fish. This movie wasn't received as well as the first one, but I mean, it was still fun, and the underwater scenes are still brilliant. And it still made $1 million at the box office. Plus, this movie would mark the screen debut of a little cowboy you may have heard of named Clint Eastwood. I don't have a lot to say about this one. It was really fun. I liked the underwater shots, but the first one just felt really special.
The creature walks among us.
In 1956, we get the third Creature movie in the trilogy, The Creature Walks Among Us. The director of the last 2 Creature movies, Jack Arnold, had gotten a little too big time to come back for the third one because he was A-list now. So this movie is directed by Universal's longtime assistant director, John Sherwood. We need to talk about something before we get into this movie, and that's the fact that this is not only just the last movie in the Creature trilogy, it is the last movie in the Universal classic monster films. The journey that I have been on that started with Dracula in 1931 has come to an end with The Creature Walks Among Us in 1956. Now that being said, I still have some Universal monster movies to watch, like Jekyll and Hyde and, Phantom of the Opera, but those are going to be in later videos. Subscribe if you want to see those. But this is it. Chronologically, it's the last Universal monster movie. And it's a wild one, so, buckle up. After Gill-Man escapes from the oceanarium, a team of scientists led by the deranged Dr. William Barton board the Vagabondia 3 to capture the creature in the Everglades. Barton is mentally unstable and apparently an abusive husband to his wife Marcia, as he becomes very jealous and paranoid when Marcia is with other men. So basically, he's super possessive of women, which is, something I'm sure our boy the Gill-Man can relate to. And it doesn't help that this dude Jed keeps making passes on his wife Marcia. And Marcia always says no, he has nothing to worry about. Marcia accompanies the others on their initial dive to look for the Gill-Man, but during the dive, Marcia swims too deep and is overcome with raptures of the deep, temporarily losing her mind and removing all of her scuba gear. After they save her, they eventually capture the Gill-Man, who is badly burned in a fire, leading to a surgical transformation performed by Barton. And while bandaging the Gill-Man, the doctors notice that he's shedding his gills and breathing using some sort of lungs. And now that the creature has more human-like skin, he's giving clothing, and the doctors attempt to get the Gill-Man used to living among humans. Even though his life has been saved, he keeps staring out longingly at the ocean. It turns out that the woman that he really wants to be with is the sea. Well, Barton ruins the plan when, in a murderous rage, he kills Jed, jealous that he made romantic advances towards his wife. And realizing what he has done, Barton then tries to put the blame on Gill-Man. The Gill-Man saw the killing, and realizing that he's being blamed for the murder, is like, "Nah, dog, I ain't do that," and goes on a rampage. He kills Barton and then slowly walks back into the sea. He's last seen on a beach, advancing towards the water. This is a movie. It was so wild and fun that I wish our boy Clint Eastwood would have had this be his first movie. I mean, gosh, the Creature trilogy is just an amazing way to end the Universal monsters. It's a new monster that has fresh life, and it allows these movies to go out on a high note. I really liked this movie, and I just think it's really amazing that in this one, the monster who is obsessed with a woman and it leads him to killing a man isn't actually the creature. It's a man. And in this one, Gill-Man is truly a victim. I mean, he did kill that one guy, but he was being held captive. By showing us a real monster like Barton, we realize that Gill-Man isn't a monster at all. We are the monsters, which has been a pretty constant theme throughout all of these films. So it only feels right that in this final one, they removed the thin veil covering this theme and just blatantly say, humans are the monsters. Guys, I really enjoyed these movies, and even though that this video is about the kind of official ending of the Universal Monster Collection, it's not the end of my videos covering the subject. Like I mentioned before, I did miss some movies in my initial watch through, so there will be videos covering those soon. Down the road, I'm going to be making a video comparing the Universal Monster movies versus the Hammer horror films, so if that's something you'd like to see, make sure you subscribe. And if there's any other monster films that I've missed so far in this series, you can comment down below the ones that I should be watching. And I have other videos not relating to monsters coming out soon, so, you know, stick around if the next one's not about Frankenstein. So, yeah, see ya. Welcome to the little end screen thingy. I have a podcast. It's called Written By, and you can subscribe to Written By Podcast. It's basically a screenwriting podcast where me and my writing partner, Robert, we either draw a random suggestion and write a short film based on that suggestion in an hour, or we compete with rival movie pitches head to head, and our audience votes for which one they would rather watch. If that's something that would interest you, you could subscribe to Written By, link down below, listen wherever you get your podcasts. See ya.